people. But there's a hell of a difference, isn't there, between 1,500 and 25,000. And the claim that 50,000 tweets celebrating Cox's death or praising her killer, that all was in the first line of the press release that they sent out. So there's no doubt that Hope Not Hate, an organisation who were fanatically for Remain, and who, I have to say, whenever I meet them, appear to be very filled with hatred themselves. But please, if you're from Hope Not Hate, ring in and tell me it's all about love and peace. But actually, many people did grossly over-egg the pudding, and I think of that there can be very little doubt. But I wonder what Sir Phil in Peterborough makes of this. In Peterborough, Sir Phil, was there a big rise in people saying horrible, beastly things?
I think there was, Nigel, yes. I hope you're well, by the way.
Thank you. I'm all right, yes, and you?
Yes, yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, so we actually had, we've got a very large EU population that have come in.
Yes.
And at Peterborough was we were 70% to leave Europe.
Yep.
But
the European Union?
The European Union, yeah. And the amount of abuse that I've heard myself, I own a pharmacy, and so, we meet a lot of people. And a lot of people are, from the EU, from the continent, and they have been telling me that there has been quite a significant rise in the way, that they've been talked to badly just throughout their everyday kind of life, and it's a little bit upsetting, to be honest.
Yeah, but Sir Phil, I remember going into Peterborough, campaigning by the cathedral back in 2009, and already those tensions were there. Already bad things were being said between the Polish community and the English community. So this wasn't just because of the referendum, surely.
Well, the problem with the referendum is it kind of legitimized that belief, rightly or wrongly. People have taken that as as a cue that they are allowed to express this sort of hatred towards them, and it's just not on. And to be honest,
okay. Sir Phil, listen. I take your point. I pick it up. You saw it in Peterborough. The referendum did make it worse. Let's hope it's short term. But right now, you're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC and live from Strasbourg, and it's 7:15.
Nick Ferrari at...
Well, before the break, Sir Phil, our pharmacist from Peterborough, said that he had seen a rise in unpleasant things being said in Peterborough, a city in which tensions had already been high for many, many years, particularly between a very large Polish group of people and the local resident population. But the question is not were things said in the heat of the moment. The question is, has it been exaggerated that there's been some huge spike in hate crime? And your texts and tweets coming in, of course not. The referendum didn't change people's opinions. Those opinions would have remained whether it was an in or out. Same levels occurring. It was probably just reported more as it was hyped up at the time, and that's from Bertie. Nigel, I have no doubt there has been a huge increase in the reported number of hate incidents. I also have no doubt that 99% have been reported by Remainers, and that's come in anonymously. Mr. Farage, we have had hate crime before we voted leave. Of course we have. So they are bound to blame Brexit. I think Brexit will get blamed for everything as time goes on. And that's Kathy in Southampton. Natasha says on Facebook, hate crime is what the left media wants it to be called. Everyone has the right to express their likes and dislikes without being tagged racist. And Phil Martin says, the ones who commit the most hate crimes are the ones who claim to be the most tolerant. Well, Phil Martin, let me tell you my experience of what this country has been like since that vote on June the 23rd. On the 24th at lunchtime, I went to, about midday it was, and what was there to do at midday? We just won a referendum, but to go to the Marquis of Granby in Westminster. And I had to be hustled out of there very, very quickly. So threatening, aggressive were people who'd been on the Remain side. I thought perhaps that was just a sort of short-term thing. Actually, what I saw was a most extraordinary level of intolerance, aggression, abuse, threats, and that's just walking down the street, let alone the death threats and goodness knows what else that have happened online. And I'm not alone. There are Tory MPs, there are Labour MPs, and please, if you are an MP that was on the Leave side and you've seen this, then please do call in and share this. Actually, all these organisations who say they're about love and everything else seem to have a total hatred of those with a different opinion, so much so they don't think we're even entitled to have the view. I mean, goodness me, they've even called us racists for daring to discuss controlling immigration. So I have to say that, you know, I do take what Sir Phil, our pharmacist from Peterborough, says. I'm certain that in the few days that followed that referendum, things were said that shouldn't have been. But my point, folks, is things were said on both sides that shouldn't have been. Of that, I'm certain. I know. I've been on the sharp end of it myself. And I think the idea that because we voted Brexit, that somehow the Leave campaigners had whipped up this feeling in the country. I did not hear a single person that was advocating Leave on radio, on telly, in a newspaper, online, saying the reason we must do this is because we hate all of these people coming in from the rest of the European Union. I think the whole thing has been grossly exaggerated. That's my view. I wonder what Anthony in Enfield thinks. What's your view, Anthony?
Hi, Nigel. Good evening.
Hi.
Nigel, you just spoke about your experiences in regards to being on the bad end of death threats and that sort of thing. And some people may say that perhaps you put yourself in that position, which I don't agree, because no one should experience such behaviour. But some people may argue that you put yourself in that position due to you being such a controversial character. But I'd like you to think about one thing for a moment. Yeah? Yep. Some people have never put themselves in that position. It may just be because they look different from the indigenous, and therefore they may call behaviour that you have just mentioned in terms of yourself, which I deem as unacceptable. But I also think you're a hypocrite, Nigel. And you do lead people. Yeah, you're very smart in terms of leading questions, and you steer people in terms of how you see the world, which I think you're a very, very dangerous individual. But I will say to you, pot and kettle comes to mind. Yeah, and you talk about over-egging the cake, and you talk about exaggeration or being grossly exaggerated. Yep. That makes no difference. The fact that there has been an increase, which I'm sure that you wouldn't disagree with that. Yeah, we can always argue the numbers, but there has been an increase. Yeah, and that increase can be pinpointed from that time of Brexit. Now, you did something very irresponsible in terms of the lead-up to the vote in terms of the referendum, which was to show a poster, which I think someone in your position, which can, you've got airtime on the TV and on the radio and LBC and so forth, yeah, which was very irresponsible to show that poster that you did. And I don't know if you're man enough to admit that perhaps that was not the right thing to have done at the time, and that would feed into people's fears. So what we're seeing at the moment is we're seeing this polarisation, that you're either extreme left and you're either extreme right. But it's leaders and people like yourself that people will look to for guidance. So when they see the world is falling apart, when they see that perhaps their economy, local economy, the country's economy, perhaps isn't where they want it to be, then that's a very, very, very dangerous situation that we're in, as we saw when Hitler came to power, and he wasn't popular at first, as you know, and we know what happened in the German economy and what he then was in terms of his...
I don't think, Anthony, come on, hang on a sec. You know, I mean, I've listened very carefully to all the points you've made. When you start talking about Hitler, then I think you're over-egging the pudding in quite a big way. You say that I'm controversial. Well, I'm not sure I'm that controversial. All I've ever said is we should govern our own country, make our own laws, control our own borders, and re-engage with countries around the world like the Commonwealth. Fascinatingly, Anthony, virtually everything I've been saying for 20 years is now being said, let's hope it gets done, but is being said by the Prime Minister. So maybe she now is a controversial figure that will attract hate for saying the same things that I said. As far as that poster was concerned, Anthony, I launched that poster because it was about Angela Merkel. It was about Merkel's madness, which, by the way, she's U-turned on this week, of saying to people, anyone can come. And those people weren't refugees, Anthony. They were young males. They were economic migrants rushing to get into Europe because of what Merkel said. And what the poster said was, the EU has failed us all. I can't apologise for the truth. Absolutely not. But what I do think is that tensions were high on both sides. And, you know, Anthony, I take your point. And, by the way, I'm conceding that bad things were said post the referendum. I think bad things were said on both sides post the referendum. Do you know, when England played Germany at football, people in pubs sing 2 World Wars and 1 World Cup. That's pretty insulting, isn't it? You know, major national events do lead to this. But do you honestly, Anthony, I mean, you know, tell me, do you really think that people like me or Boris Johnson stirred up hatred in our Leave campaign?
Hello?
Hello, Anthony.
Oh, sorry, you still there? Sorry,
Hey, I'm asking you. Did we stir up?
Sorry.
Anthony, I'm going to have to give up you, mate. Sorry, we've given it our best shot there. I'm going to go to Tim in Chesterfield. Tim, you know, did the Leave campaign stir up hatred in people? Did that lead to a rise in a huge spike in hate crime immediately afterwards?
Yes.
Okay, go on. Tell me why.
Because you exist.
All right. Well, we've really, really hit the peaks here, haven't we? So we'll move on to Webby in Stockport. Webby, what's your experience in Stockport? What was it like in Stockport after the referendum result?
Hi, Nigel. To be honest, the hate crime and racism has always existed in this country, even before the referendum. However, since it has increased, I think it has gave them, as the other guy was saying, is like something. It has like give them a freedom to be more racist and more hating other races, other communities. I myself experienced my car being vandalized 3 times.
Yeah.
Without talking about those abuse messages on Facebook and on social media. So I believe it has massively increased. And the bigger question is, what is the government doing about it? And what the police are doing about it?
Well, maybe the good news is that even if that, and look, no one doubts there was an increase, but I'm making the point very strongly in this part of the programme that actually Leave campaigners received the most and continue to receive the most extraordinary abuse. The good news, Webby, of course, is the police do say those figures are now tailing off, so maybe that's a good thing. But I would just say this to you. You said that, you know, there'd been a lot of hatred and racism in this country way before the referendum had even been called. And that's undoubtedly true. But let me tell you this, after my experience of 19 years working in Europe itself, I think that we have always been and continue to be the most tolerant country in Europe. And last night on the show, Webby, I talked about this big Chatham House poll, talking about attitudes towards immigration. And there were fewer people in Britain that wanted to ban people coming from Muslim countries than any of the other European countries. No country is perfect, Webby. I'm sorry that your car has been vandalised and you've had a bad time, but I do not think there has been a massive spike in hate crimes because of that referendum. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC, live from Strasbourg. You know, asking ourselves, was this so-called massive surge in hate crime following the Leave vote in the referendum exaggerated, and views coming in on both sides? But one quick stop press. So the European Commission today have issued a report saying it's going to be too complicated, too tricky, too difficult to disengage the United Kingdom from the common fisheries policy. It's too complex. And isn't it interesting that in the government's own white paper, and when Theresa May issued that a couple of weeks back, remember I commented, I said, there's something missing here. It's called fishing. In the government's own white paper, they said this. In 2015, EU vessels caught 683,000 tonnes of fish in UK waters. UK vessels caught 111,000 tonnes of fish in UK waters, with no added comment at all. And the truth comes out today, it's going to be too difficult. And George Eustace, our fisheries minister, says, oh, now we've got Brexit, we can negotiate a better deal with our EU partners. We don't want a better deal with our EU partners. We want to be like Norway, Iceland and normal countries. We want our territorial fishing waters back, Mrs May. And if you don't deliver that, we have not got the Brexit people thought they were voting for. And one other little story out today, European related, is the European Commission today have given the United Kingdom our final warning over air pollution. Now, this has been rumbling on since 2010, and to be fair, it's not just the UK they're threatening, but we're facing the possibility of a £300 million fine because the air quality in our cities isn't good enough. Funny, isn't it? We get a southeasterly wind, and all the pollution from Germany comes to British cities, and we're told it's our fault. I suggest we leave quickly, and we don't pay a £300 million fine. Back to our question. No one doubts, surely no one doubts, that bad things were said on both sides, both during and since that dramatic referendum on June the 23rd last year. But has there been a dramatic spike in hate crime, or have there just been more crimes reported or incidents reported? And I wonder what Leon in South Norwood makes of this. Leon, good evening.
Hi, Nigel. How you doing?
I'm all right. What do you think about this?
Well, you know, I'll be honest with you. I don't think personally there's been a spike in hate crimes. And the reason why I say this is this. Hate crimes have always been around, okay? And I'll draw a parallel. If you look at the way the media reports the rise of the far right, they talk about, they connect it to Islamic extremism, okay? And I can tell you, as a black person, growing up in the UK, parents are Jamaicans, of immigrants, countless situations where we've witnessed situations with the far right during the time I've been raised. But the media chooses to report certain things, to justify certain things. And what they're doing now is justifying for the Remainers the situation with hate crimes. Do you understand me? Are you with me?
Yeah, I am with you. I mean, tell me, Leon, how big is the far right in South Norwood?
Well, it's not big in South Norwood, but they've always been there. The presence has been there for the last 20, 30, 40, not in South Norwood, but in many parts of the country. Okay, and you can ask any non-white person in certain parts of London, Bermondsey, certain parts of Bethnal Green. There are certain parts of Birmingham, Pipe Hayes. My uncle was stabbed in the early 90s just for being black, being in the wrong place. There are certain places you cannot go as a person of colour after a certain time of day. And these situations have always been there, but they talk about it now the last 4 or 5 years. So what's new to many people is not new to other people. Do you understand me? For some people, it's
I do. Did the? I mean, the referendum itself. I mean, there was no issue of black versus white in the referendum, Leon. I mean, I didn't see it. Did you see it in South Norwood?
Absolutely not. But the point I was just trying to draw a parallel. What I'm saying is that hate crimes have always been around.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, of course. But Leon, I would say to you that when I compare that to the rest of Europe, I think we are the most tolerant, easygoing country in the whole of Europe, personally.
I've just moved back from Sweden. I've spent the last 15 years in Sweden, 3 years between Spain and Norway. I've just moved back. I've been back in England 4 weeks after being abroad for 18 years. So I've got some great experience of how it is in Europe. England is absolutely one of the most tolerant countries. And this is one of the reasons why I actually moved back, because the thing I love about this country, and I must say, we're probably the only country in the EU or a great part of Europe that does not have a far-right government in the parliamentary system. And that is something that I'm proud of with the UK.
Leon, fantastic. You've made that point, and you've got experience of living over Europe. You've made that point beautifully. Thank you. Yes, no country is perfect, but goodness me, we're a damn sight better, I think, than the rest of Europe. I'm going to ask Aftab in Dagenham, did you see a genuine spike in hate speech following that referendum result, Aftab?
Hi, Nigel. Yes, I did. I'm astonished that you can even be so dismissive of what is fact, of evidence.
I'm not dismissive, Aftab. I'm not dismissive. I'm acknowledging that after a major national event, all sorts of things get said. I'm questioning whether it was this dramatic spike that some people have... Yeah, go on.
Yes. Well, the question then is, if given that nothing else changed, and the only thing that was changed was the Brexit vote, what else can you attribute it to other than the fact that it was Brexit and the campaign that was led, and how it emboldened certain people to actually be more vocal with their racism? I mean, I myself personally experienced it. To be so dismissive of that, I don't know how you can say it wasn't attributed to Brexit. It was something else. I don't know.
No. No, no, please, I'm not being dismissive at all. You know, I've listened to the calls tonight, and I've got my own mailbag as an MEP, and there's no doubt bad things were said. I'm acknowledging that. I suspect, actually, though, what did happen was a lot more hate incidents were reported, and given they can be reported by third parties and not the actual victim themselves, I think perhaps we exaggerated it a bit. That's all I'm saying.
I'll pick you up on that. Just because the very fact that you're using the word hate incident, what is being reported is a hate crime. There is a difference. Do you know the difference? Do you know?
Yeah, I've got all the definitions here in front of me, and most reports are logged as incidents, but not logged as crimes.
Very good. And yet the Press Association reporting a 50% increase in hate crime, not incident, but a hate crime, which means a crime was committed, which therefore begs the question, if it wasn't Brexit, which emboldened racists or whoever you wish to attribute it to, what was the actual driving factor that we saw this increase? This is simple statistics that is being discussed here, and well, I'll leave it for you to answer, to explain that.
Well, I think that how we categorise crime, the first caller on tonight said if she has an altercation, a physical altercation with her neighbour, the fact that they come from another part of the world, that could be logged as an altercation, but equally it could be logged as a hate incident stroke crime. So there are lots of ways of defining this. Aftab, I'm sorry if you took abuse after the referendum, but I honestly, I mean, let me ask you this. Has it now settled down?
Has it settled down?
Yeah.
Well, in terms of my personal experience, I haven't looked at the stats. Yes, it has. I had a couple of incidents. Thankfully, I haven't experienced it now. But, what we generally see is this tends to happen. We saw it after Brexit, and it emboldens it. The previous time this happened is, would you like to know when the previous time I was involved in a racist incident prior to Brexit? When UKIP were out campaigning general election 2015. That's the last time. And sadly, that is what happened. As I've explained to many people before, that what it does is embolden certain racists who feel, rightly or wrongly, that this is what UKIP stands for.
Well, do you know what? Do you know what, Aftab? Do you know what, Aftab? If it wasn't for UKIP campaigning in Dagenham, it'd be the BNP campaigning in Dagenham, and it's very different. And just one point, that until the police release the information that says each crime is related to Brexit, it's unfair to relate the two, because we just don't know. But Aftab, you put your points emotionally and powerfully and well. And yes, it's interesting, isn't it? Actually, one of the reasons UKIP's taken this abuse is because the BNP have literally just disappeared up their own fundament. Your Facebook messages. Peter Howan says, maybe successive governments are at fault for the state of UK public services. Do you seriously believe it's all due to the immigrants? Get real. Well, Peter, whether we talk about public services or housing, the fact is our population is rising by 500,000 people every single year. Ben Atherton says on Facebook, the lefty liberals have had it their own way for far too long. Now they are fighting back and they are becoming violent. Well, they're certainly becoming quite aggressive, Ben. Texan tweets, the media operate dual standards. When a foreigner is attacked, it's a hate crime. When a foreigner attacks and even murders, it is not. Dear Nigel, regardless of a spike on hate crime, either way, how much responsibility do you believe public figures should have on either side for the levels of hate crime in the UK today? Joshua in Bournemouth. Joshua, that is a really brilliant question, and I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But right now, you're listening to Nigel Farage, live from here in Strasbourg. The time. The Press Association report today shows that there was a significant, a 50% increase in reported hate crime and incidents in this country following the referendum. The question is it just more reporting, and has the whole thing been somewhat exaggerated? Now, before the break, Joshua asked that question. He said, how much responsibility do politicians on both sides of the argument have for an increase in hate crime? Well, Joshua, the answer is, of course they have responsibility. I have been called sexist, homophobe, Little Englander, hater. I mean, there is no term of abuse that has not been thrown at me by politicians on the other side over the last 15 to 20 years. And yeah, I've said one or two pretty sharp things back, but nothing ever in line with that. And I would just say this to you, Joshua, that people may not have liked some of the realities, some of the facts and figures, some of the images that were used by the Leave campaign. But at no point did anybody in the Leave campaign ever incite anyone to be nasty to people on the basis of where they came from. In fact, quite the opposite. You know, we made the point that if we had back proper border controls, then race relations, which are, by the way, the best in Britain, far better in Britain than the rest of Europe, would improve further still. So, Joshua, politicians do bear responsibility, but I genuinely do not think the Leave campaign opened the door to any of this. Now, interestingly, the one county that saw the biggest increase in reported hate crime was that of Dorset. And our next caller is Edward in Lyme Regis. What is going on, Edward, in Lyme Regis?
Hi there. Well, I don't think there's a spike at all. I think there's just been a lot more sensitivity, basically.
Yeah.
I think that I think people always divide. People naturally divide. That's why you have places like Chinatown and things like that, and in big cities. And in difficult times, people naturally split up a bit more, and that is basically it's human nature. So you have to have one culture. You cannot mollycoddle to everybody, sort of thing. If you sort of say, I'm getting a bit lost here, but.
Well, passions, Edward, were raised by the referendum and all sorts of things. And certainly, June the 24th, I've never seen the country so polar, in a sense. There were people cheering and there were people crying. And it was a very, very big moment. In many ways, general elections are a bit like that, aren't they? You think about it. Just look at what gets said, campaigning on the streets between activists in the Labour Party, the Lib Dems, the Tories, UKIP, whoever it is. So passions do get raised by these events. But no, Dorset, you are the #1 part of this country, Edward, for a huge 100% spike in Dorset.
That's complete rubbish.
It's complete rubbish. Edward, I thank you and enjoy the beautiful Lyme Regis. Your Facebook messages, texts and tweets, do we need to get bogged down in the technicalities of this debate? Or should we recognise that the referendum led to a vast increase in hostilities towards migrants from both inside and outside of the EU? Well, Sam, it also led to a vast increase in hostility against Leave campaigners. The Remainers expressed open hatred for those who voted Leave. Well, I've certainly experienced that. A great one here. In denial again, Nigel. Amazing how some folk deny statistics and evidence. Also, remember Joe Cox's murder. Deny and ignore all you like. UKIP has contributed to the rise in hate crime. Well, do you know what? You're absolutely right. I shouldn't have bothered. I should have just let Nick Griffin and the BNP do it all. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't you be happy? And my last text here for the moment. There's no way that the Leave campaign stirred up hatred. That's just a load of absolute nonsense. Anger in our society long predates the referendum. You're right about that, Nigel. And that's Alan in London. And I've got Hassan in Southgate. Hassan, how did the referendum impact you there in Southgate?
There has been impacts in Southgate. I'm not going to deny it, but I'm not going to sit here and sort of over-exaggerate it and make out like Southgate has changed detrimentally and I'm no longer happy there. I am British born.
Yes.
I am also a Remain voter, but I am also of Turkish Cypriot origin. So I do have an obvious Mediterranean look about me. Now, I'm not going to deny it as well. I have faced, let's say, comments that I wouldn't have, I wouldn't necessarily like to make myself about other cultures. Off-the-cuff jokes that have become normalised, such as, we've voted Leave now, when are you leaving?
Yep.
I'm
sure. No, I'm sure that's going on. Yep.
Now, that is going on, and they are...
Hassan, is it being... Hassan, just tell me, is that being done with malice, or is it being done in genuine, friendly, jocular jest?
Well, this is what I was going to say. It depends on who it's coming from. There's been incidents where I've quite knowingly known that the person has said it with no malice at all, and it's just become a general joke. It's something that's going on. It's in the media at the moment. Everybody has a bit of a joke about it. But on the other hand, there are some people who, when they say it, you can see that they mean it, and to the core have, a racist or not necessarily racist, but hatred at least, deep within them. Now, I'm not going to deny, you've been making the comments a lot throughout the show this evening. This hatred and this rhetoric is something that has pre-existed Brexit. It's, you know, that
yes,
it's stupid to deny that. But what I would say is that Brexit has opened the doors and made it more acceptable and given voice and emboldened people with those views. And I'll explain why. In this country, I believe that we have a culture for blame. Now, I'm going to make some quite historical but poignant points. If we look at, for example, our performance in football, let's go back to Euro 96. We had an abysmal performance. We lost the tournament. And then what did the entire country blame our performance on was the colour of the kit. It was a grey colour, and it was said that because the kit was grey and so dull and boring, it was demoralising and took away the, you know...
I think, Hassan, with respect, I think we're deviating off the point a bit here, mate. I mean, interesting though it is, but just let me ask you one last quick point, because lots of other people want to get on the line. You know, you said you saw what you saw after the referendum. Do you think we're now back to normality?
When not back to normality, I think times have changed. I don't think we'll ever go back to what we knew Britain to be before. I don't think things will ever be the same. And I do think that, you know, what people are complaining about, racist acts and so on, they have increased. It is directly linked to Brexit. And I think a lot of it is because we have a blame culture in this country. You've opened the doors by saying, look, the problem is immigration. The problem is we have no control on our borders and so on. And therefore, you've given a reason. You've pointed the finger.
I think, Hassan, to be honest, for the 20 years before that, you weren't even allowed to discuss it. So the fact we did discuss it did raise passions. I thank you for your call. Mr. Farage, you appear to be a one-trick pony. Have you any policy ideas to make Britain great again, apart from divide and conquer? Peter in Glasgow. Yes, Peter, I really, really do. Let's re-engage with the rest of the world. Let's govern ourselves. Let's be confident. And let's have a skills-based immigration policy like Australia. That's a start, Peter. Hi, Nigel. I believe that in a prosperous society, there is no hate crime. Hate crime is a sign that some people are not doing well. George. Nigel, hate crime has always been here. I remember the National Front marching and the BNP in Dagenham. Stephen, the London cabbie. Well, Stephen, I made the point that UKIP now is strong in places like Dagenham, and it is a non-racist, non-sectarian party with lots and lots of people from ethnic minorities and all religions and all orientations active within the party. And I'm going to go, my last caller of the evening is Will in Leamington Spa. Will, what did you see in Leamington Spa?
Oh, hi Nigel, it's good to be on. Well, basically what I wanted to say was the fact that I think most of this is actually caused by left-wing sort of media and parties, because what they do is something like UKIP's position, which was a completely logical position, is made out to be some sort of balmy racist thing. So then all these racists that are, let's say 0.1% of the population, then go, oh, 15% of people agree with me. So they then get a sort of certified view, while at the same time everyone else is in hysteria because they think 15% of the population is agreeing with some sort of racist sort of crackpot view, when in reality it's just the fact that there's such a bias representation of what the viewpoints actually are. That everyone thinks, and you can see the same with Trump in America. Is that right?
I think you're right, Will, because actually I have been through years of being the only person saying we should have an Australian-style point system. Myself and my UKIP colleagues, mercifully in the referendum, others joined us. Will, thank you. You're my last caller of this evening. We've got through a shed load tonight of texts and Facebook messages and everything else. And my final thought on this is, no one in the Leave campaign wanted to stir up hatred in this country in any way at all. Those of you out there that did use the excuse of Brexit to be pretty beastly and horrid and abusive and racist to your neighbours and friends, well, stop it. Shut up. Go home and lock the door. We don't want to see you again. Our country is a great tolerant country, the most tolerant country in the whole of Europe. There was an increase in nastiness after that referendum. There was not a surge in hate crime. We're getting back to normal, I'm pleased to say. You've been listening to The Nigel Farage Show here.
John Bickley is a member of UKIP's National Executive Committee and the party's spokesman on immigration. Thanks for coming in, Mr. Bickley. Do you pick up this sense that Britain is becoming more racist, that we really are dividing, fracturing more than ever before?
No, I don't. I think the problem with the word racism is its meaning has been changed, particularly by people on the left over the last 15 years. If you talk about immigration now, and depending which party you're in, you're called racist. Now, if you think about this, every country outside of the Schengen area controls immigration. So does that mean they're racist? So I think when you ask people about racism, is it a metaphor for actually talking about, is immigration become something that concerns them even more than it did a year ago? And I think Brexit very much was about immigration as one of the key points about taking back control. I think we need to be very careful here. Certainly people on the Remain side who just can't accept they lost the referendum are desperately trying to paint those people who voted Leave as either stupid, uneducated, or they've actually been called racist.
But are you saying that there should be no controls on language at all, that people should just be able to express whatever they feel regardless of whether it upsets or offends?
Well, I believe in free speech. I believe in the ability to offend people. You know, my mother always said to me, you know, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. So I think people should be free to say what they say. But the problem with this word racism, it's a bit like Orwellian doublespeak. It doesn't really mean what it does mean, which is one race feeling more superior than the other. Immigration's about numbers. I mean, as far as UKIP's concerned, we want an immigration policy where anyone in the world, regardless of skin colour, ethnicity, sexuality or creed, believes they have an opportunity to come here. But it has to be done under a controlled Australian-type points-based system. We don't care about people's ethnicity. It's numbers. And at the end of the day, it's a sovereign nation and a government that's elected by the people. One of the things it really needs to do is control its borders and control who comes here. And that when they come here, they're going to add value to our society. Of course, that's not happened over the last 20 years. And in fact, the Tory government can't even control the numbers coming from outside of the EU, numbers they're supposed to be able to control.
But can you really divorce the two, though? I mean, the problem is that there has been an uptick in the number of racist attacks since the referendum. 41% we're talking about. These are official figures. I mean,
certainly in the first few days after the referendum.
Well, then that would suggest that there is some correlation
but
then.
Just for a few days. And in fact, I think the latest figures show that if you're talking about hate crime, that's actually fallen back below last year's figures. I mean, I think a lot of people, particularly some people on the Remain side, a lot of people in the Labour Party in particular, and the Liberal Democratic Party, just couldn't accept the result. Couldn't accept that the people had decided to speak up for themselves at last. And so they decided just to undermine them and call them names. And as we know, we've been told if you voted Leave, you're stupid, you're racist, you're uneducated. That isn't going to go down really well in working class heartlands.
The problem is, though, that this becomes very binary, doesn't it? I mean, do you accept that immigration does bring added benefit to this country?
Of course it does. I mean, our party is very much about immigration. We believe immigration is very positive for this country, but not uncontrolled immigration. Again, I point you to what I said earlier. Outside of the Schengen area, every country in the world controls its borders and controls its immigration. I mean, I can't go to Australia and decide I want to live there because the weather's much better than over here. I can only go there if I get there on their points-based system. I can't go and live in California, even though I might very well like to. I mean, this is the way the world works. You just can't have mass movements of people where countries are not capable of actually integrating them. And what's gone wrong over here in the last 15 to 20 years, and it's particularly gone wrong in working class areas because they've taken the brunt of both unskilled immigration and asylum seekers. I mean, in Rochdale, for instance, back in 2014, they had more asylum seekers housed in Rochdale than the whole of the southeast of England. So it's no great surprise that in Labour heartlands, up in the north, where people are relatively poor compared to the southeast, they feel pretty peeved. And they want us to take back control, and they want immigration controlling, and they want our borders patrolling and controlling.
We must wrap it up there, but John Bickley from UKIP, thank you very much indeed. Well, we'll be...
From all the appalling physical attacks on people and the intimidations on foreigners.
That's certainly appalling, but I do think...
It certainly unleashed something.
But if you look at the actual statistics, it's sort of the rise of 50% is something like, you know, a rise from 42 attacks to, you know, 63. It's not actually... it's often exaggerated.
Okay, that has the establishment in the media and in Westminster on the run. They want to keep their cosy cartel together for this century. It isn't going to happen.